10 feet to the sky, feet on each side. Nothing will save me. I've got to save myself. Water's creeping in. It's darker than it's been. Seems like nothing's left out there, but I'll scratch and claw like it's worth seeing the ground again. I keep hanging on. I know I'll get there someday. I'll be free of this someday. But I'm doing what I can. I don't need a rope anymore. Sinking deeper now. Voices getting loud. Grab the top and let this rip your heart out. Grab back to the mud. My ankles covered up. It's heavy in this hopeless head. My hands are shaking and my fingers dripping blood, but I keep hanging on. I know I'll get there someday. I'll be free of this someday. But I'm doing what I can, doing what I can. If I get too cold, I'm gonna bring you here with me. It hasn't been easy. I've almost had enough. I keep looking up till light breaks through the violent sky. Feeling closer to something alive. Reaching in and pulling you out. Stay here on my side. I don't need a rope anymore. I keep hanging on. I know I'll get there someday. I'll be free of this someday. But I'm doing what I can, doing what I can. If I get too cold, I'm gonna bring you here with me. It hasn't been easy. I keep looking up. I don't need a rope anymore.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Livestream Happy Hour. My name is Eric Brayman, and I am so excited to welcome our special guest today, Chef Andre. Chef Andre, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for welcoming me.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so excited to have you here. I'm going to go through just the kind of introductory welcome everyone to the live stream, and then we'll jump right on into learning so much more about the huge range of incredible work that you do. So the live stream happy hour started over a year and a half ago at the beginning of the pandemic when we were losing those opportunities to connect with one another in person. So we created this virtual platform for our artists to be able to connect with audiences and audiences to connect with our artists. We have been able to feature over 40 artists through the course of this live stream happy hour. And we are so excited to get Andre on here. We were supposed to have you last year, and we're so excited that we got to follow back up and get you on here. So we're thrilled to learn more about you today. This is also a great opportunity to remind everyone who's watching this that supporting artists and arts organizations, especially in this time frame when everyone is working so hard to bring our community back to life in so many dynamic and meaningful ways, help us process what we've experienced altogether for the past 2 years. Now is the time to invest in the arts. It's the time to invest in artists. So please consider what organizations and artists you care deeply about, make an investment in their art or make a donation today. And make sure you're also keeping civil rights organizations in mind as well. They're helping make sure that our community as a whole is supporting everyone and everyone that matters. So please go make a contribution. We know people who donate to one organization often donate to multiple organizations. So after you donate to that first organization, find that second one that you super love and give a donation there as well. Awesome. Enough out of me. This is all about you, Chef Andre. So let's jump right on into it and learn a little bit more about who you are as an artist. So Andre, what are some of the art forms that you explore and practice?
Well, I don't do as much pen and ink and drawing as I used to. I took a lot of that artistry and I put it into plating, cooking, more culinary focused things, and now getting into literary arts and media. I like taking photography. I don't own an expensive camera quite just yet, but I do have some experience working on some short film stuff, being an extra and all that. And so I've been trying to try my hand at doing some low level acting. So we're doing that, but also I've been getting a chance to direct some commercials for some products coming up, including the children's books that I authored. And I want to get into movies, not necessarily just being in them, but do a feature film or an animated movie, something on that scale. It's a natural transition from taking something 2D, I think, to want to see it in 3D and other incarnations of that artwork.
Amazing. Yeah, it's really interesting. I love hearing this kind of story of how many different forms of art and type of community programming that you intersect with, from, starting with food that you kind of talked about there, but then moving into literature. And it sounds like in your past, you did some pen and ink / drawing kind of activities and community events, and now film as something that you're interested in. It's really cool to hear this broad range of things, which gets me to the question, Chef Andre, tell me a little bit about that name and how that's kind of stuck around as you've transitioned into all these different art forms that you explore.
Well, believe it or not, I have to attribute that to my youngest son, who wouldn't stop calling me a chef. I do have a culinary background, but it was more cafeteria style cooking. And then I got into catering, a little bit more high-end, high-quality opportunities. But really, I was kind of stuck in a good way, recovering and recuperating from some health issues. And I was basically a personal chef for my family, mainly my son. He wouldn't stop calling me a chef because he thought the food was so good. And he told me, he said, someday you're going to teach other chefs how to, make their food taste better. And man, like, he was really motivational, very convincing. And I just didn't want to let him down. And he's a harsh critic. Like, he's developing quite the palate, and like it's a lot to live up to. But don't tell him. I'm just trying to keep it going and challenge myself, and do my best in that fashion.
Isn't that funny how our family, the people who love us most, are often our biggest cheerleaders and our biggest critics? It's funny how those two kind of come together in one.
Now, he's definitely kind of transitioning more into the critic role because his palate's becoming more refined, and he's going through this phase where he doesn't like vegetables he used to like, and he's very opinionated, and he's right most of the time. I'm like, yeah, it was my best work, I know, like. So I have a reputation to keep with him first and foremost.
I love that. That's so funny. Well, it means that he must have been eating very good food if his palate is that refined. You got to taste the good stuff to know what's good, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He's really fortunate. I struggled a lot with food insecurity, and he's actually been exposed to a wide range of things, and I introduce him to a lot of foods. I've done that with all my kids. I have 2 older children, so I'm kind of doing a partial empty nest thing. He's the remainder in the household, and he's getting all the spoils. And so now he's kind of more of the kitchen manager than anything right now.
I love that. Well, let's check out some of the food that you have dished. It's when we're talking about you being someone who has interacted with food, I mean, you've done some incredible, beautiful dishes. So walk us through some of these pieces that you've shown got here for us to check out.
Oh yeah, so that one I really like that one because I used some purple potato to make some ravioli. Figs are my favorite fruit, and I think I used some hazelnuts on that one. I should have taken notes, but I'm pretty sure those are hazelnuts or filberts as they call them here. I didn't know that was a thing until recently. So yeah, so I like taking things that probably would be a little bit more mundane or not as pretty and making them look really good. Like I don't know the last time Chef Boyardee plated ravioli as such, but I figured I'd take a go at it, and here we are.
Yeah, that presentation piece that you're talking about, you can see the incredible artistry, and I think this is something that is sometimes forgotten in food. That food is an art form, right? And especially when you start to think about the presentation being a part of the experience of experiencing food and eating. And this is just beautifully presented, and such beautiful color stories with the orange and the green next to each other is just beautiful. With the purple balanced right there, you've got all the secondary colors right there on the plate. It's a really stunning presentation.
Thank you. I like to look at the plate like it is a canvas. And so there's a lot of spacing and, a lot of things you mentioned with the colors and the balance. I take a lot of that into account, and that comes from having an artistic eye and some of my upbringing. I really challenged myself to look at what I'm doing from a different lens. And that came from a bit of criticism too, as well. I got some kind of harsh reviews in a public forum, and it kind of changed me for the better. And I after feelings were hurt a little bit, I took a look at what I was doing, and I said, I should look at this like I would my own art or something a little bit more critical, and have an honest reflection that's not based on the emotional attachment to what I'm doing.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. We also have a really great comment that came in from Samantha Ash. They shared, Chef Andre's beautiful culinary art has been a huge inspiration for me. Very talented and busy man. Bravo. Yeah, we couldn't agree more, Samantha. Well, let's check out another beautiful dish here. Yeah, tell us about this piece. I think there might be a slight delay, so apologies if we're stepping on each other, Andre.
No worries. I don't do a whole lot of desserts per se, but when I do, I like to try to make them from scratch. And this one, I wish I had my descriptive list, but I'm pretty sure it's some kind of cobbler that I've made, and raspberries. I don't remember what the inner filling was, but it might have been the raspberries were a bit more of a garnish than anything. So I'm assuming the inside might be peach. There's like little dough balls that got baked, and I'm not the best at doing lattice work, but I figured I would at least get the patterns down and like weave it. But this was early on, and baking is like a science. So I like to tweak a recipe here and there, and for it to be visually slightly different or have some personal touches to it. So this is what I came up with.
Yeah, it's beautiful for not, being huge into desserts. I mean, and baking. This is just, again, another beautiful presentation. You can see that you have an artistic eye that you're bringing into this, that there's composition. You're thinking about line, you're thinking about color. It's really awesome to see. Well, let's check out the next one. This looks delicious. I want to eat this right now.
All right, there we go. Okay, this is a fun one. So certain dishes I don't really cook because I want to enjoy them without being critical of them. This is the pad thai dish. Once again, I'm not going to say hazelnuts. I'm going to say filberts. Has some filberts in there. And I can't remember if those are chanterelle mushrooms that were foraged that I used, and some purple broccolini. I had a lot of Thai influences coming up. My best friend, who also ended up being my next door neighbor, is Thai, and his
Mhm.
mom's Thai, and I wanted to marry his sister just so I could eat that way on a regular basis. Um, and just those kind of influences that I would see in the magazines. Like I grew up on Yan Can Cook, and anything I could find in the libraries and things like that that was food related. I just imagined what it would look like if I did the fancy things that I saw in the high end restaurant windows when people were eating and those kind of things. I just never saw myself um, paying that much or really being in that position. So I imagined it first and then
Mm.
wanted to know how I could at least do some of that at home, even if I couldn't afford that.
Mhm. That's awesome. I really love hearing some of your story about that. This wasn't something that you were really deeply trained in, but it was something that you really sought out from a deep passion that you held, and to be able to find that connection between, the reality of food insecurity that sounds like you were raised with, and to invest that back into how can I create this for myself? How can I be someone who can imagine it into my own life is really exciting to hear, and then to find your art in it. It's a really beautiful story, and food is something that connects us in so many ways, and it's such an essential part of who we are, how we're raised, in the communities that we're a part of. um, it's just really powerful to hear your stories there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's amazing how broad a gap it can close. Like when people found out I could cook, all of a sudden I was getting invites to their home and everything else, and it was kind of odd. I didn't really know anyone here personally, but it was like wow, you show someone you can cook, and next thing you know, you're in their kitchen and you have full access pass, and it's a very welcomed thing to be able to do. And so I noticed early on people like people that can cook.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for showing us some of your incredible work that you've done culinary wise. But at the very top of the show, you did talk a lot about some of your other passions. And one of them I know is youth literacy. And you are a published author. So tell us a little bit about your passion for youth literacy. Where did that come from, and how has it influenced the type of art that you've explored recently?
Absolutely. My passion for youth literacy really came from struggling with literacy as a youth. I needed a tutor. I loved books, but with reading levels and other things, those posed barriers. I remember I even got in an argument with a librarian because I wanted to check out a Godzilla book, and there's some pretty heavy syllable words there, in some of those names of the characters and the monsters, some real pronunciation issues. And I found myself wondering, like, why am I arguing with you? You should be encouraging this. And they're like, well, what if you need help? Who's going to help you? And I was like, that's not the point. Like, you're a librarian. You should be encouraging me to read. And I was like, if I have trouble reading, then I can look at the pictures. I'm an artist. Hell, I can draw. Like, it was a full on battle, to just get access despite where I was at. I wanted it, and for me, it didn't seem sensible to keep me from something when I was showing that much interest. And so
Mhm.
I kind of had to advocate for myself.
Yeah. So you've become an advocate now through events that you put on, I know, but also through the books that you've written. And we've got a couple pictures, so I'll go ahead and pull those up so we can kind of look at those while we're talking here. But you've written books. So tell me, kind of thinking about some of that passion for youth literacy and some of the ways you felt barriers towards your expression and interest in literature, how did that influence the way that you approached writing a book and creating a book like these?
Well, one of the things that influenced my design idea behind the books was I used to love Shel Silverstein books because they were black and white. I always wanted to color them. I used to get in trouble for drawing and doodling in class, and I wanted to do something that was a little bit more interactive for people that I felt like were struggling with not having access to things in a varied approach. I found that tactile learning, I needed to interact and engage to help retain some of the information and focus. So I created the books in the way I felt would help me, inspired by the types of stories that I liked, and also inspired by how I drew with my oldest son, who now is the illustrator of the books. I would draw pictures and have him um, finish coloring them if he wanted or doodle on them. But it was kind of like an earned reward thing. It wasn't just like, oh, here, fill in the blanks. He would see me drawing, so he'd sit with me. And every now and then, I'm like, no, you got to draw it on your own. And that just transitioned to he eclipsed me. And that was fantastic. It was one of the proudest and most humbling moments of my life. And from that moment, I became his biggest fan. So I hope that kind of answered the style of book, because it's a color along story book. We are working on fundraising to get the money to do full color versions of the books, which I'm proud to say, very close to completing the Hippocratic in full color. So yeah, we're just trying to make it fun and accessible for kids in ways that I think is needed, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Andre, that's really awesome to hear. And I love how you're thinking about the way that students and that kids interact with books when they pick them up to read them, and pulling from that inspiration of Shel Silverstein and wanting to color the book. And that kind of, the students who often struggle with literacy are the students who the learning experience of just observe and ingest isn't really enough for them, right? It doesn't engage them in the way that's something that inquires you to come in and participate, be a part of the story by adding the color to the characters or having some form of interactive environment. It draws them in a bit more, right? And what a powerful way to do that, by creating these multiple ways that these books can be purchased, whether it's for a student who needs that color to be able to feel inspired and drawn into the story, and the student who wants to be able to create and add the color to the story, that you're engaging multiple learners through these multiple formats of it.
Absolutely. I think it's really important that we remember the child's needs first and foremost. And, people learn differently. And, if we can inspire a love for literacy that isn't hindered by reading level or what they're presented by that's prototypical, then I think that opens up a lot of doors. Mainly, it allows for kind of a hybrid learning style. Like these books, they're not traditional books. I had trouble getting them in the library. They're too thin. They're not quite what they're used to. They're books. Like, we have augmented reality and all these other things, but we can't put a thin book into the library because a kid might want to color in it. I'll give you guys, I'll donate. We can make it to where they have not only ownership, but they're able to interact with the books and not just be inspired to read and learn, but also to design and create and take ownership of part of the creative process as well. So it's not just about reading, it's about being engaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I absolutely. And that makes sense, right? There are these systems that are in place, like you're talking about the library, that have these kind of expectations of what literature should look like. And you're kind of trying to break the norms of that a little bit. And that's a really radical action to take. And, something that I'm sure that the libraries want to support, but are just trying to figure out, like, how do we even fit this into our system, right? And that's often the biggest barrier why students continually get missed, is because how can we fit these new approaches into our system? And, the care may be there, but the ability to be flexible isn't always there. And you're kind of saying, no, like, bend, move, adjust, like, this is good stuff. This is changing. This changes the way that students are able to interact. Well, I want to mention you have the community votes here. So tell me a little bit about this 2020 Platinum winner here. That's got to be a great honor.
Yeah, it is. Considering it was in the toy category, so we entered in the Hippo Critic, and it beat out, I believe, Toys R Us. And I probably shouldn't be calling out some of the other local players in the business, but it was really an honor to have an educational tool, a literary arts vehicle, be voted best toy. And so,
Mhm.
the feedback, not just from the voters, but the kids themselves, because, we've gotten a lot of community organizations to buy in, and some of them have donated books. And so they're out there available, getting positive feedback and responses. And so we know the desire is there. We just have to get a little bit more creative about how we allow kids to access these books that are obviously popular. I mean, toy for a book, like, I mean, how often does that happen?
Yeah, it's really amazing. It's really fantastic. So tell me a little bit more about Hypocritic. And I know you've got Little Big Bear is the second one that came out. You talked about how your son did the illustration, colored the illustrations for you, and it sounds like you did the line art for them. Is that right?
No, no, no. He did the illustrations and he colored them. I helped with some of the conceptual arts early on, but you wouldn't
Cool.
want to see that in print. Um, and so he's the better artist, so he took over that role. And we've gotten so used to working with each other. It's like, I mean, I don't want to take away any credit, but it's like, wow, this is what was in my mind, but better. So I joke around and call him Andre 2.0 instead of just Andre Jr. But he really is he's just his own artist. He's a Renaissance artist. So remind me the initial question. It was tell you a little bit about the books. I started gloating about my son. I'm really proud of him. So I got
No,
distracted. What was the
gloating is
question?
fantastic. It's really good to hear about your son. And that's got to be a really special part of making these books is being able to do it together, right?
Absolutely, it was essential. The first book, The Hypocritic, really does have a lot of personal elements, and in all actuality, they all do. They're all based off of um, things, either characteristics, life experience, life lessons, or things that I wanted and needed to express during a time actually when I was rehabilitating, recovering from some injuries and some health issues and surgery. And so I wrote the books to help process some of what I was going through, but I did it so with getting the message out there. I felt like kids were really being cheated out of good quality reading, and also marketed to an extent where it just seemed, dare I say, kind of predatory. Like it seemed disingenuous and really taking advantage of the youth. I say trust them with a good story. It doesn't always have to be this very pointed, opportunistic exploitation of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that of kind of how you wanted these to be kind of it sounds like really caring and intriguing for the students, but kind of that exploitative piece. What are some of the things that you feel like you've seen in literature that have kind of been a little bit more in that vein and how you're moving away from that? How do you
Yeah.
incorporate that into your story to ensure care?
Well, to elaborate a little bit, I noticed there seemed to be some reoccurring themes in some of the books, and it just seemed really kind of cookie cutter, and not all of them were really all that good themes. It was just really repetitious, and it became obvious to me when I saw it in the book fairs, and it was like, wow, like I get some of the humor and the potty humor and this and that or whatever, but like, what is this
Mm,
fixation that we are doing? I mean, why are we so focused on these particular areas to the point where it was either the books seemed like product merchandising. I mean, they had
mm,
so many things attached with them. It didn't even really seem like it was about the book or the story, or it was just some really heavy messaging that was just kind of a little bit overhanded. Like it seemed like the
mm.
story itself and the reading itself was lost, and it didn't really seem like there were inspired books there. It seems like it was just a sale of anything that caught their eye and shined and sparkled. So
Mhm.
I felt like they were being cheated out of the actual experience of, things that really inspired me when I was coming up, the classical stories. But I felt like it was time for some new classics, and
Yeah.
I want to write towards that.
I love that. I love that intentionality, and to look at the things that maybe might be easy to fall into, those traps that are easy to be like, oh, kids laugh at fart jokes, so let's just throw a fart joke on every single page. Or, hey, like Marvel's a big thing right now. How can we make a superhero comic, like another superhero comic or, character? And you kind of moved more in this realm of like, what is the story? What is going to intrigue them, and the kind of the nature of the unraveling of what this character experiences, in a way that is respectful of kind of their capacity to take on like things, right? Like, not that it has to be hard or sad or deep, but that they can handle like a storyline, right? And it sounds like that's kind of what you're pursuing with this
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Mhm.
And some authenticity and originality. Like I feel like a lot of what's being bought for them is really marketed towards us. Like, when I said earlier, like there's a natural transition, we're seeing some of the characters and the things that we grew up with, and it's like, does a kid really want that, or do we really want to just get that for the kid because we think it's cool? Like
Mhm.
I think there needs to be a little bit more of um, original things that they can kind of sort of grow up and fall in love with, and develop, in their own timeline, not just, things that have nostalgic value for us, and or, kind of subconsciously we're just, oh yeah, we're trying to appease them in some other area of unfulfillment in our own lives. Like,
Mhm.
trust them with a good story and see what happens. You might inspire them with that story or to make their own. Like, I believe they need some ownership.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love hearing about these books. And for those who are watching, please go check out the links in the comment section below. There should be a link over there to the GoFundMe page, should be the very top link, to support the full color versions of Hypocritic, I believe it is, and support the continued print of these incredible books that you've put together, Andre, with your son.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to add there about that?
Yeah, I was going to say it's actually a fundraiser for both books. We're going to try to create what basically is going to amount to kind of like a collector's edition or a teacher's edition, where it's full color, and we're working with some local partners to do something that's kind of making this type of book even more of a hybrid book. And so I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to say too much, but it's really cool, and help us pay for it, because we're really going to give back in a way that I think is going to set some precedent, and you're going to see us doing some revolutionary things on a local level that I think are going to spread to a national and international level.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. I love to hear that, Andre. Yeah. Well, congratulations. We'll be on the lookout. All of us will be on the edge of our seat waiting to find out what some of the surprises will be. Well, let's
Me
move
too.
forward a little bit. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I said me too.
So let's move forward a little bit. So we talked a little bit about this. You have the name Chef Andre that you use for the multiple art forms and art ways that you express yourself in our community. But also, you've kind of broken our community's expectations of you as an artist over and over and over again, from being a chef to being an event planner to being an author to being someday an actor and being a photographer now. Tell me a little bit about how you have broken the community's expectations of you as an artist. How has that been kind of through that process? How has it gone for you?
Well, I might be jumping to another question, but I think it has to do with pigeonholing. I really wanted to dispel some of the beliefs that, once you are a thing, that thing has to define you, and that thing is usually something that's service oriented. Like, I've always been in service oriented positions, cooking, and I don't mind that. But when I needed to step out of that role, it was like people had a really hard time seeing me outside of the kitchen. So like when I had my real estate lessons, it was like, everyone had their real estate license, and that's cool. But like, where you really would excel at is, how about you make me a sandwich? So it was like the more I tried to get out of the kitchen to expand into other areas of interest, I kept getting thrown back into where people wanted to see me. And usually it was in a position of servitude. Now, granted, I don't mind doing what I do well, but I want to do great at other things outside of just um, kind of areas where I feel they have great upward mobility. But sometimes you need to be able to diversify and do it on your own
Mhm.
terms where you want to be. And so I kept Chef Andre as kind of a reminder that, hey, I can be that, but I could be so many other things. Like, I actually want to be one of the most famous chefs that probably have cooked for the least amount of people, just as a form of personal accomplishment, and to have that accolade. Dr. Seuss, I don't think he ever was really a doctor, and Mother Goose, I don't think she was ever really a goose. So Chef Andre can foray into some other areas.
Yeah, and it's really fun too to have then the name Chef Andre be something that is constantly reminding people what you think I am, I promise I'm more, right? And there is something really exciting and intriguing in that. And I think that a lot of creatives all across our community would completely agree that, sometimes you get known for one form of expression, and then the second you start kind of tiptoeing into another area, people are like, wait a minute, you're a painter. You paint. I understand you as a painter. What do I do now that you're writing, right? Or or vice versa. You're an actor. You're not supposed to be the person who is over here doing like, experimental dance. Like, that's not what you are. And we can sometimes get so obsessed with these categories. And as creatives, I don't think there's a single creative in our community who would say that they only do one single form of expression. There may be one form of expression they highlight and focus as their professional career, but all of us have multiple forms of creativity within us all the time. And how often we are so limited and pigeonholed, like you said, into these specific categories. So I know that your name is kind of one of those pieces that you kind of intentionally kind of pointed toward and held to be able to kind of break those expectations. How have you worked through those moments where people have kind of have pushed back on you and have said, "Oh, well, I thought you were this thing. Why are you doing that thing?" What's your process there for helping people comprehend the multiplicity of who you are?
Um, I haven't thought of a name for it, but I think it's kind of like positive pettiness. Like, I like, I want to make a fan of people, of me and my work, and that's kind of how I get back. Like, I want to be successful. Like, oh, you don't like me? I kind of want to maybe be on a billboard by your house. I want your mom to like me. I want my book to be your kid's favorite book. um, I push back in ways where I find inspiration. Like, someone didn't think I was funny, in a certain instant. I was like, well, you know what? I think I'll do a comedy show, actually. So um, I don't know. It's just kind of how I handle things. I like to approach things directly, but also the diversity and what I attempt to do. A lot of that is came from having a lot of doors closed on me. I think it's a very privileged notion that you could just do this one thing, be from this one place, and have this community that rallies around you. And there's really one thing that you can do and one thing only, and that's where you're going to make your living. Well, that's a very privileged experience, and some
Mhm.
people have to diversify um, just to survive. And so for me, one, it was not just a creative thing. It was really just a matter of, what am I going to do if I'm not able to do this one thing, because I had some physical and some health issues. But if I get stuck working dollar per hour, that's a
Mhm.
problem. So the creativity was, in diversifying, was, how do I make money in my sleep? How do I do something where I'm getting residual income? How do I get paid more than once off this thing? How can I have ownership instead of just servitude in an area, and doing performative things that really, they're great, and I appreciate being able-bodied to do those things, but there's not always going to be a time when I am, and there have been times where I haven't been. And so to be locked and regimented in opportunities that are really kind of characterizations of what people expect of you, it's really limiting. And you miss
Mhm.
out on opportunities to grow and show other areas of potential or potential expertise, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, for those who are tuning in, we're talking with Chef Andre. And if you have any questions, any thoughts, reactions, Chef Andre is a multidisciplinary artist. You can drop your thoughts, comments, questions in the chat or in the comment section, and we'll pull those in if we see it. So I really appreciate kind of hearing some of these ways that you have transcended and that you constantly work to. And I really want to reflect back on one of the things you said around the privilege, right, of not needing to reinvent, of not needing to look at the multiple ways to be able to sustain yourself as an artist. And I think that is certainly something that many people can relate to. But I think, you've talked about some of the things from like health barriers that have put limitations on some of the ways that you started kind of expressing and creating, and the different ways that doors have been explicitly shut throughout your creative career. So I just want to really appreciate and kind of give a nod to that. And I think this kind of gets to another topic that you and I were talking about in kind of our prep for this conversation, which is the pigeonholing that often specifically happens to Black, Indigenous, and persons of color who identify as artists in our community. And so how have you kind of seen our community pigeonhole in some ways, that community that you're a part of, and how can we best support Black, Indigenous, and artists of color?
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that question. I've been thinking about it a lot. Um, how I see it happening is, and don't get me wrong, I think it's great to support and fund specifically cultural oriented things, BIPOC artists and things, but I think it's a little bit of a slippery slope when most of the funding is always geared towards that. It's not geared towards going into new areas of expectations or hopes. It's more like, well, show me and tell me how you've been disenfranchised. Show me where you've been discriminated against. And I think when you start defining like things by art that expresses injustice mainly, there's room for that. But when it becomes the easy go-to and it becomes the majority of what's getting funded, you're shaping the mindset, expectation, and also it's very performative. Like there's a lot of industries that are kind of have shut doors or not as open doors, and we need to support that and talk about some of that, not just where people are finding entertainment value and authenticity for supporting Black people. Like I think in BIPOC, I think there's room to do more,
Mm-hmm.
and more specifically things that aren't defined by a very selective group who often don't kind of look a little diverse themselves, but they have very strong ideas and feelings of what diversity should look like and what should sound like. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to get a little bit away from being so specific. Like as an artist, I didn't want to always have to feel like I would feel worse expressing myself and getting the money and then putting some personal and private experiences out there of injustice. Like maybe I don't want to process that way, but that's where all the money is going towards and to. So it's like either I concede and sell my tears, or wait for an opportunity that might not come, or do something else. And so I think we need to find other avenues that aren't so trauma specific, because then I think you get into the area where you're showing so much victimization. I think you miss out on a lot of the healing opportunities. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be those conversations. I think there's a broader conversation that just needs to be had as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear so much of what you're saying there, and how much it's like gatekeeping creating a narrative, and it's a reinforcement of the narratives that have often been so harmful for so many communities, and to hone into the expectation that art must come from trauma. I mean, that's just trauma porn on full display. There's no, like, that's explicitly, you know, feeding into white tears in so many ways. And that actually doesn't really support, in so many ways, what you're saying, the diversity of art that exists in communities, especially BIPOC communities that are diverse and rich and have such as wide and varied a perspective as every other identity, including white folks who are also different in all the ways that we express ourselves. But there's never an expectation that every white person needs to present their life story, their life heartache, as they're painting a landscape, or as they're putting out a pop song, or as they're, you know, there's not an expectation that is placed there. But there is but the opposite exists for so many of those opportunities for BIPOC folks. Is the expectation is, put yourself out there, tell us how you've been hurt, show us how you've been hurt through your art, and make that an expression for our community. And that's just forcing a narrative in a community that has so much more than a single story. So I really deeply appreciate you acknowledging that, because that's something that we have a lot of gatekeepers in our community who are trying really hard, I think, to do good. And you know, we miss the mark. That's a reality. And we will never get it perfect, but we can think about how can we get it closer to right?
Absolutely. And one thing I want to say is, you know, not all the gatekeepers are white. You know, there's cliches and there's cliquishness, and I think when you focus on the black-white issue, most of the time you miss a whole range of other issues. And, you know, one of the issues is, you know, like, for instance, I'm not from here. You know, I didn't graduate from U of O. I'm not an athlete. I'm not your prototypical person, per se, that would necessarily fit into a narrative that's very welcomed and very expected. Like, you know, it just, we need to create room to where it's not just, you know, these expectations that if you are here, you probably came here for sports. If you are here and you're black, then, you know, there's a natural attributes you must have, and you have a certain flavor. Like, stop that. Like, let people, you know, start being themselves and not just chasing funding sources, because there's people here who are gatekeepers that they have it dialed in. You know, they've monetized the moral high ground to the point where it's actually creating a little bit more of a divide, I think. And, you know, I could be wrong, but I think there's a whole nother narrative that is getting kind of suppressed, and it's forcing people on opposite sides of the story. And I think we need to find some more middle ground where we can come together and leave some of the expectations at the door and learn something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, we could keep talking about this for a very long time. It's a big topic. It's got so much complexity to it, but I want to make sure that we can also continue to see the wide range of artistic expression and things that you bring to our community to kind of continue to break that narrative that we are not one thing. And you, especially as one of the artists on here, is showing us the broad range of incredible work that you do. So let's talk a little bit about you as an event planner. And we've got some posters from past events that you've done here. Tell me a little bit how you got into event planning and what you feel like you kind of get out of it. Why do you keep being drawn back to that type of work?
Well, for me, community is really important, and a diverse community is very important. This particular poster was actually for a book release, and it was a 3-edition art show in the 5th Street area, where it was my son's work. And on the left, actually, that art piece is work that I've done. And then also my youngest son, he did some Lego work, but we basically did a pre-book release party where you could see behind the scenes stuff and kind of yourself in the life of an artist, you know, in the kitchen. Oh, by the way, sorry, it was a demo space for the new Gordons that were being built. So it looked like a home. So we set up shop in there like it was a big artist in residence, literally. And we had some of our work on display. That piece actually on the left-hand side I have with me to be able to show know, I don't
Here,
know
let
if you
me.
could see this, but it's little tiny dots stippling. The events that I planned were really a way to engage the community and be kind of almost like a support group. Got advocacy, and part of what I missed out on when I moved here was having a sense of community. I had no family here. I barely knew anyone except for my in-laws, but apart from that, I knew no one. And so at the events, it was a way to gather people together and to extend some opportunities to connect with each other and do it in a fun, non-clinical way. I do advocacy, and most of the events that I've done are actually like, I don't know if we can skip to
Yeah.
the poster, but I do a 5K race for narcolepsy awareness, and we've done some events like a drink, draw, and color. Oh, that's the block party. Well, the after. Oh, and that's a stand-up comedy event that we did. Um, with the nonprofit, for Suddenly Sleepy, we just tried to do fun things that were already supported in the 5K race. This is Tracktown USA, the Halloween event. That actually happened during part of the shutdown. And you just wanted people to have fun doing what they do. And people like to dress up, pretend, and do all that. So we found fun ways to get people together and just advocate a little bit in the process and tie it to a cause that people can get behind. And everybody wins.
Amazing. Well, we've actually got a video here that you put together that is of the 5K. So let's go ahead and give that a watch. It might have skipped a little bit there. My computer decided to have a little bit of a freak out right while we started playing that video. So I apologize if it didn't come across perfectly, but it was a lot of people having tons of fun outside and doing it for a good cause. And I know you mentioned that that was for Suddenly Sleepy. So tell us a little bit about Suddenly Sleepy and how you got connected there.
Yeah, so Suddenly Sleepy started out as an awareness campaign that I did for narcolepsy awareness. It impacts me personally. And, one of the things I noticed, there wasn't a whole lot of support groups and things like that. And so I wanted to take some of the popularity that I had from being a chef and developing some sort of community recognition and getting into advocacy. And so the little bit of social media following that I had grew, and I wanted to take that and make a significant impact. And I created the Suddenly Sleepy Sleepwalk, and then I created the Suddenly Sleepy nonprofit. And it was just a good way to get people together and party and raise awareness for a good cause and raise a bit of funds in the process to bring resources to the community and the community to resources.
Amazing. So, on top of being an event planner, an artist, a chef, an author, you are also the founder of an organization to be able to support folks who are experiencing narcolepsy. That's really, I mean, the range. You are somebody who, as you peel back a layer, you realize there's 50 more below it. It's really amazing.
Well, I'm glad it feels more amazing now. But when I was looking for help and support after getting a diagnosis, I realized there was just a need for connectivity. And I just had to creatively find a way to, kind of help someone else maybe have a little bit more of an informed experience and less of a hard time. It impacted me and my family in a way I didn't want someone else to have to experience.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for bringing it back to that, to the heart of it, the heart of why you do this work, and that it comes from a space it's something that comes from a need, not just from like a want or an interest. It's from a deep seated place. So thank you for bringing it back to that. That's really awesome. Well, Andre, our time is almost up. We've had such a great conversation. So I kind of want to bring it over to another conversation, because you showed us one of your pictures just a moment ago that is from kind of like back in your stippling kind of drawing days. But tell us a little bit, as in all of these ways that you express your creativity, and all these ways that you find ways to get your kind of your inner voice out there for the rest of us to hear. Tell us about a key person, place, or time where you found a little bit of that creative voice.
Wow. I thought I had an answer for this one earlier, but thinking back, a time that I found my creative voice, I think a lot of it really had to do with, my grandmother. And she was a really good artist. And I don't usually tell this story because it's kind of a dark chapter in my family history. But she was sought after by Walt Disney. And I remember being on her obituary, that particular accolade. And it was like, wow, just a life unfinished, so much potential. And she died legally blind, still drawing. And so that kind of stuck with me, and I wanted to do something with the family name. I wanted to restore some of the legacy I felt like was lost, and to do something with the royal name. And I wanted to get into those areas like animation and things like that, and not be stopped just short. So a lot of these aspirations really are an extension of legacy that I want to build, and a legacy I want to leave in the community, wherever I'm at.
That's really beautiful. Legacy is so important, and we carry forward. We are made up of the people before us, and I love hearing that story of how your grandmother lives in you in so many ways, and the ways that you express yourself, and the inspiration you pulled from this possibility that existed in her, and the capacity and persistence and perseverance. I hear in that too, still drawing after you're blind. There is a deep seated place where creativity lived in her that has been passed down and into you. And it's just wonderful to hear how you've taken that torch and you've really run with it. And as an outside observer, all I can say is I think that there could be no person that I could imagine her being more proud of, who's carrying that torch with such a light and guiding people and welcoming so many others into their creativity. It's really amazing to see. You're an awe-inspiring person with how you are carrying that torch forward.
Thank you. I'm just trying not to be a starving artist. I want to support others, and I don't want it to be a look down upon career. I just want it to be more diverse, more opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Britta came in and also gave a few hearts. I think those are for your grandma as well, and that beautiful story.
Thanks,
well,
Brad.
I have one final question for you before we officially jump off here. Where are you finding inspiration and or creative energy right now?
Really, the community. I'm trying to get the word out that we're doing a lot of diverse things. We have the books translated. We're trying to have movies made. We're just trying to get to the next step of artistic expression and show this next generation that, there's possibility. Never give up on your daydreams.
I love it. Thank you so much, Andre. This has been such a wonderful conversation. You are somebody who's doing so much for our community, and I hope that continually, as you continue to transcribe yourself into the many more layers of creativity that you hold in you, that our community only responds with open arms saying yes, because you are such a great asset for all of us to be able to continue to benefit from. And I know that I learned so much from you today, and I look forward to others being able to do that as well.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Andre. And for the rest of y'all who are watching, we will be back for the first Wednesday of next month for another Fiesta Cultural Takeover, the live stream happy hour. And we'll be back again next month as well with another live stream happy hour experience. Sounds like we might be talking with the Lane Community College Improv Troupe to learn a little bit more about their show that will be coming up at the end of next month. So keep tuning in for all these live stream happy hours. We look forward to seeing you down the road. Bye, y'all.